The galaxy had known about humans for 60 years, and in all that time nobody had ever taken them seriously. Ambassador Alara Chun walked through the grand halls of Axis Prime Station, and she kept her face calm even as the alien diplomats looked past her like she was not there at all. The Vraxi delegates towered over her with their scaled bodies and sharp teeth, and they spoke to each other in their growling language without bothering to lower their voices. The humans sent another one of their little ambassadors, one of them said, and the others laughed at Alara, pretended not to understand their language, even though she spoke it perfectly. This was part of the game, and humans had been playing it for a very long time. In the records of the Galactic Concord, humanity was listed as a minor species, and the description was almost embarrassing to read. They called humans clever, but physically weak, and they said human technology was unremarkable, and their military power was nearly non-existent. Great elder races of the galaxy saw Earth as a small blue world full of artists and traders and dreamers, and that was exactly what humanity wanted them to see. Truth was hidden so deep that even most humans did not know it existed. Alara entered the observation deck and looked out at the stars, and somewhere out there beyond the glittering lights of 1,000 civilizations was Earth. Her communicator buzzed with an encrypted message from United Defense Command. Contingency Prometheus remains dormant, and we await final authorization. She read it once and deleted it immediately, and then she went back to smiling at diplomatic functions, like nothing had happened. The Galactic Concord was supposed to be an alliance of equals, but everyone knew that some species were more equal than others. The Vraxi Dominion had the largest military fleet in known space, and they used it to take whatever they wanted. Insectoid Cathari Swarm controlled vast territories through sheer numbers, and they bred soldiers faster than anyone could count them. The ancient energy beings called the Luminarch claimed to be above petty conflicts, but they had power that nobody fully understood. And then there were the humans with their 12 little defense ships orbiting Earth. Other species found it almost cute. High Counselor Wren of the Luminarch had once patted Alara on the shoulder with a tendril of pure light, and told her that humanity should focus on what they did best. Your music is quite pleasant, he had said, and your stories are entertaining enough to pass the time between real matters. Alara had thanked him politely and filed the insult away in her memory, where she kept all the others. The Vraxi had been expanding their territory for decades, and the Concord did nothing to stop them. Every few years, they would announce that another small species had been welcomed into the Dominion, and everyone knew what that really meant: conquest and submission and the slow death of everything. That made a culture unique. The conquered species became workers and soldiers for Vraxi glory, and their own dreams were forgotten. Allah had watched it happen again and again, and each time she had to bite her tongue and say nothing, because the time was not right, because humanity was not ready to show the galaxy what they truly were. War Admiral Desok was the most feared military commander in Vraxi history, and when he walked into a room, everyone noticed he stood 3 meters tall with scales, the color of dried blood, and eyes like molten gold, and he wore the medals of 100 victories on his chest. Other species whispered about him in fear, and even the Luminarch treated him with careful respect. When Desok announced that the Vraxi were claiming the Kepler Corridor, everyone listened. This region of space is now under Vraxi protection, he declared to the full Concord Assembly, and all species currently occupying these systems will relocate within 30 standard days. Alara felt her heart freeze in her chest. The Kepler Corridor contained 3 human colony worlds with a combined population of 40 million. People knew Melbourne and Kepler's Hope, and the farming world of Harvest. Desok's golden eyes found her in the crowd, and he smiled with all of his many teeth. The human colonies will, of course, be given assistance in their evacuation, he said, and his voice dripped with false kindness. We understand that your species lacks the resources to move quickly. Other delegates murmured in sympathy, and some of them actually looked sorry for humanity. The Luminarch representative floated forward, and his form flickered with gentle colors. "Perhaps this is for the best, Ambassador Chun," High Counselor Vren said. "Your people are not suited for this region of space, and the Vraxi will make better use of these worlds." Elara wanted to scream at him. She wanted to tell him what humanity had been building in the shadows for 60 years. She wanted to see the fear in his glowing eyes when he understood the truth, but she said nothing. She bowed her head and asked for time to consult with Earth, and everyone assumed she was preparing to surrender. That night alone in her quarters, Elara opened a secure channel to Admiral Yuki Tanaka on Earth. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen, and her expression was as calm as stone. "You have seen the Vraxi announcement," Elara said. "We have been watching since the moment Desok entered the system, Admiral." Tanaka replied, "Our assets are in position, and all we need is the word." Elara closed her eyes and thought about the 40 million people on those colony worlds. She thought about the children who had never known any home but knew Melbourne, she thought. About the farmers on harvest who had spent their whole lives making the soil bloom. "Not yet," she said finally. "We need to give them one chance to back down, and if they refuse, then God help them all." Admiral Tanaka nodded and hid the transmission deep beneath the surface of Earth in a facility that did not exist on any official record. The Admiral walked through a corridor that stretched for miles. Doors lined the walls on both sides, and each one was marked only with a number behind each door. Was a weapon, not a bomb or a missile or a ship, but something far more dangerous behind. Each door was a secret that humanity had kept for 60 years. Admiral Tanaka stopped at door 1 and placed her hand on the scanner. "Wake them all," she said. Somewhere in the darkness, something very old and very powerful began to stir. The people of New Melbourne had never seen anything like it. 40 Vraxi dreadnoughts hung in the darkness at the edge of their solar system, and each ship was larger than a mountain too. 100 support vessels surrounded them like hungry wolves. Waiting for the signal to attack, the colonists gathered in the streets and looked up at the night sky, and some of them cried, and some of them prayed. They had 30 days to leave everything they had ever known, and they did not have enough ships to carry everyone. Governor Sarah Mitchell stood on the balcony of the Colonial Administration Building and watched her people panic. She had received orders from Earth that made no sense to her. "Do not evacuate," the message said. "Hold your position and trust us." Trust them with what exactly? Sarah had seen the size of the Vraxi fleet, and she had seen the single human frigate that stood between her world and destruction. The UDS Perseverance was a good ship with a good crew, but it was one vessel against an armada. Captain James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Perseverance and looked at the tactical display. Every red dot was a Vraxi warship, and there were so many that they almost filled the screen. His communications officer turned to face him. "Sir, the Vraxi are broadcasting on all frequencies, and they are mocking us." James nodded slowly and kept his face completely still. "Let them," he said. Vraxi had opened a channel to their homeworld, and they were showing the confrontation. As entertainment, millions of Vraxi civilians watched and laughed at the tiny human ship that dared to stand against the might of the Dominion. Where Admiral Desok himself appeared on screen, and his golden eyes gleamed with amusement. "Little human." "Captain," he said, "do you truly believe you can stop us with your toy ship?" James opened a channel to respond. "War Admiral Desok, this is Captain James Okonkwo of the United Defense Ship Perseverance, and I am here to observe your fleet movements." And nothing more. Desok laughed, and the sound was like rocks grinding together. "Observe then, little human, and watch carefully, because what we do to your colonies will serve as a lesson to the entire galaxy." The channel closed and James turned to his crew. "Maintain position," he said, "and keep recording everything." His tactical officer frowned in confusion. "Sir, should we not call for reinforcements?" James almost smiled. They are already on their way, Lieutenant. Back on Axis, prime the Galactic. Concord held an emergency session to discuss the crisis. Ambassador Elara Chun sat in her designated seat and listened to the elder races debate the fate of her people. The Cathari representative clicked and buzzed as it spoke through its translator. The human colonies are unfortunate losses, but we cannot risk war with the Vraxi Dominion, and the mathematics of survival do not favor intervention. The Luminarch glowed with soft, regretful colors. We have always valued humanity's contributions to galactic culture, High Councilor Vren said, but we must be realistic about the balance of power, and the Vraxi have earned their dominance through strength. Elara listened to them discuss her people like they were numbers on a spreadsheet. 40 million lives meant nothing to them. When it was finally her turn to speak, she stood slowly and looked around the chamber. I request a brief recess to communicate with Earth, she said, and to receive final instructions from my government. Desok waved a clawed hand dismissively. Take all the time you need, Ambassador, and we are in no hurry to crush you. The other delegates chuckled at his joke, and Elara left the chamber with her head held high. In her private office, she opened another secure channel to Admiral Tanaka. The Concord will not help us, Elara said, and they expect us to surrender. Admiral Tanaka's face showed no emotion. Then they will be very surprised, Ambassador, and the assets are fully activated and all hidden installations. I've reported ready status. Elara took a deep breath. How many ships, Admiral? Enough. Give me a number. There was a pause, and then Admiral Tanaka spoke a number that made Elara grip the edge of her desk. It was impossible. It was absolutely impossible, and yet she knew the Admiral would not lie about something like this. We have been busy, Admiral Tanaka said simply, and now it is time for the galaxy to learn what humanity has been doing for the past 60 years. Elara returned to the assembly chamber, and every eye turned to watch her. She walked to the center of the floor and stood before the gathered representatives of 100 different species, where Admiral Desok leaned forward in his seat, and his teeth gleamed, while little Ambassador, he said, have your people accepted their fate? Elara smiled, and it was not a diplomatic smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Humanity respectfully declines to evacuate our colonies, she said, and her voice rang clear through the chamber. We suggest that the Vraxi Dominion reconsider their position and withdraw from the Kepler corridor immediately. For a moment there was complete silence. Then the chamber erupted in laughter. The Vraxi delegates roared with amusement, and even the dignified Luminarch flickered with colors that suggested disbelief. Desok laughed loudest of all. You suggest that we withdraw, he repeated. You with your 12 little ships suggest that the greatest military power in the galaxy should run away from humans. Elara did not flinch. Yes, War Admiral, and that is exactly what I suggest. Desok rose from his seat and towered over her. You are either very brave or very stupid, Ambassador, and in 30 days, when your colonies burn, you will learn which one. He stormed out of the chamber, and his delegates followed him. The other species looked at Elara. With pity in their eyes, they thought she had lost her mind. They thought humanity was committing suicide. High Councilor Vren floated toward her, and his form dimmed with sadness. Ambassador Chun, I had hoped your species would show wisdom in this matter, and now I fear we will never hear human music again. Elara looked up at him, and her smile did not waver. Hi, Counselor, I promise you that after today, the galaxy will hear something from humanity that it has never heard before. She left the chamber and returned to her quarters, and sent one final message to Earth. Authorization granted, and may God have mercy on us all. Across the galaxy, in hidden places that no one had ever suspected, something began to move. Ships that had been sleeping for decades powered up their engines. Weapons that had never been fired began their targeting sequences, and humanity prepared to show the universe what it really meant to be afraid. War Admiral Desok was not a patient creature. The humans had insulted him in front of the entire Galactic Concord, and he would not wait 30 days to punish them for it. Move the fleet forward, he commanded from the bridge of his flagship Dominance. We will take New Melbourne today, and the other colonies will fall by the end of the week. His officers obeyed without question, and the massive Vraxi Armada began its advance into the inner system. Desok planned to make an example that the galaxy would never forget. He would not simply conquer the human colonies. He would destroy them completely and broadcast every moment of their suffering across the stars. Let the other weak species see what happened to those who defied the Dominion. The fleet moved past the outer planets, and their sensors swept the space ahead. Everything appeared normal. The single human frigate still held its position near the colony world, and it had not moved since the standoff began. Desok bared his teeth in anticipation. Open a channel to the human ship, he ordered. I want their captain to watch what is about to happen. Captain Okonkwo's face appeared on the main screen, and his expression was completely calm. War Admiral, he said, I must ask you one final time to withdraw your forces from this system. Desok laughed and leaned back in his command chair. Well, what little human and will you throw harsh words at us? No, War Admiral, Okonkwo replied. I will not throw words. At that moment, the sensor officer made a sound that Desok had never heard from a Vraxi before. It was a sound of pure terror. Admiral, the officer gasped. We are detecting anomalies throughout the system, and ships are appearing from nowhere. Desok spun toward the tactical display, and what he saw made his blood run cold. They were everywhere. Ships were emerging from hidden stations carved into asteroids that had seemed completely dead. Ships were rising from beneath the ice moons of the outer planet. Ships were appearing from the dark spaces between worlds where no one had ever thought to look, and they were not small ships. Desok saw carriers the size of small moons with thousands of fighters launching from their bays. He saw battleships that dwarfed even his mighty dreadnoughts. He saw weapons platforms that bristled with technology he did not recognize. Count them, he whispered. How many ships? The sensor officer's voice shook as he answered. 3,000 confirmed. War Admiral, and more are still appearing. 3,000. Ships. The entire Vraxi Dominion fleet numbered only 800 vessels. Humanity had been hiding a force that could crush them 4 times over. Captain Okonkwo's voice came through the channel again, and now there was steel in his tone. Vraxi fleet, you are trespassing in human sovereign space, and this is your only warning, and you will power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted out of this system. Desok stared at the screen, and for the first time in his life, he did not know what to do. His first officer stepped forward. War Admiral, should we retreat? Retreat, the word burned in Desok's mind like acid. He was War Admiral, Desok, commander of the greatest military force in the galaxy, and he did not retreat. He did not surrender. He conquered all ships, he roared. Attack formation and destroy them all. The Vraxi fleet charged forward, and their weapons blazed with deadly light. It was the biggest mistake the Desok had ever made. Human fleet did not fight like any force the Vraxi had ever encountered. Their ships moved in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. Their weapons struck with surgical precision, targeting engines and weapon systems while leaving life support intact. The first wave of Vraxi fighters was gone in seconds, and they did not even see what hit them. Human fighters swarmed like angry insects, and each one seemed to know exactly where to strike. Of Vraxi shields that had never failed before collapsed under weapons that should not. Exis-gravity beams crushed entire sections of ships without damaging the rest. Dimensional shields appeared and disappeared, letting human weapons through while blocking every Vraxi attack. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, every single Vraxi vessel was disabled and floating dead in space. Not destroyed, but broken, helpless, but a Desok stood on the bridge of the Dominance and watched his human boarding parties cut through his hull. He expected torture. He expected execution. He expected the revenge that any conquered enemy would take instead. The humans who entered his bridge wore clean uniforms and carried their weapons with professional discipline. Their leader was Captain Okonkwo himself. He walked up to Thesok and looked at the defeated admiral without any anger or triumph in his eyes. "War Admiral," he said, "you fought bravely, but this battle was over before it began, and I hope you understand that now." Thesok said nothing. Okonkwo reached into his pocket and pulled out a small container. "Water," he said. "You must be thirsty after all that fighting." Thesok stared at the offered drink. "You are giving me water," he said slowly. "I just tried to destroy your colonies and murder your people, and you offer me water." Okonkwo shrugged. "You failed, and now the fighting is done, and we treat our prisoners with dignity, because that is what humans do." He pressed the water into Thesok's clawed hand. "Drink, Admiral, and when you are ready, there is something you need to see." The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every species with access to the Concord's information network watched the battle footage in stunned silence. 11 minutes. The mightiest military force in the galaxy had been dismantled in 11 minutes by a species everyone had dismissed as weak and harmless. But that was not the most shocking part. After the battle, the humans broadcast a set of coordinates to every world in the Concord. They were the locations of hidden human military installations, all of them. Thousands of bases scattered across the galaxy in places no one had ever suspected, near Vraxi, space and Kethari territory, and even close to the ancient worlds of the Luminarch. The message was clear: humanity could have struck anywhere at any time. They could have conquered the entire galaxy if they had wanted to. But they had hidden instead. They had waited, and now everyone wanted to know why. High Counselor Vrem watched the broadcast from his chambers on the Luminarch homeworld. His form flickered with colors that had no name in any language: fear and confusion, and something that might have been respect. "What are you?" he whispered at the screen. "What have you been doing all this time?" On the disabled Vraxi flagship, Thesok watched the same broadcast beside Captain Okonkwo. Humans stood silently as the coordinates scrolled past Thesok's mind raced as he calculated what this meant. The humans had been stronger than everyone else for decades. They could have ruled with an iron fist. They could have become the new masters of the galaxy. Instead, they had pretended to be weak and let others mock them and kept their power hidden. "Why?" Thesok asked finally. "Why did you hide all of this?" Okonkwo turned to look at him, and his expression was heavy with something like sorrow. "Because we were not hiding from you, War Admiral, and we were preparing for something else, and something much worse than the Vraxi Dominion." He gestured toward the stars beyond the viewport. "And now that you know the truth, you need to understand why we built all of this." Thesok felt a chill run down his spine. For the first time, he realized that humanity had not been playing the same game as everyone else. They had been playing a completely different game, and the galaxy was about to learn the rules. The Galactic Concord had never seen an emergency session like this one. Every species sent their highest representatives, and the great chamber on Axis Prime was filled beyond capacity. Fear hung in the air like a living thing. The elder races who had ruled the galaxy for millennia looked at each other with uncertainty in their eyes. Everything they thought they knew had been wrong. High Counselor Vren spoke first, and his luminous form burned brighter than usual. "We demand an explanation from humanity," he said, and his voice echoed through the chamber. "You have deceived us for 60 years, and you have hidden weapons throughout our space, and you owe us the truth." Ambassador Alara Chun stood alone in the center of the floor. She looked smaller than ever, surrounded by hundreds of alien delegates, but she did not seem afraid. "You are right, High Counselor," she said. "Humanity does owe you the truth, and that is why I am here today." She pressed a button on her datapad, and a holographic display appeared above the assembly. It showed the galaxy, as everyone knew it, with the territories of the great powers marked in different colors. 60 years ago, humanity joined the Concord, and we saw immediately that we were surrounded by species more powerful than us, and more aggressive than us, and more willing to use force. The display changed to show the long history of Raxi conquests. We watched the Dominion consume one species after another, and we watched the Concord do nothing to stop them, and we realized that if we revealed our true capabilities, we would become a target. Desok sat in the human delegation section, and he listened with growing understanding. "So you pretended to be weak," he said. "You let us think you were no threat, so we would leave you alone." "Partly," Ilara replied. "But there was another reason, and a much more important one." She changed the display again, and this time the hologram expanded far beyond the familiar galaxy. It showed the great dark void between galaxies where nothing should exist. And in that void, something was moving. 30 years ago, our deep space sensors detected something at the edge of the universe. Ilara said, "We did not tell anyone because we barely believed it ourselves." The display zoomed in and the chamber fell completely silent. An armada was crossing the void between galaxies. Not dozens of ships or hundreds or even thousands, millions of vessels moved through the darkness. Like a swarm of locusts, they came from a direction where no known civilization existed. They came with purpose and hunger and terrible unity. "We call them the Silence," Ilara said, "because every civilization they encounter goes quiet. And we have traced their path through the cosmos and found only dead worlds behind them." The Cathari representative made a clicking sound of distress. "How long do we have?" it asked Admiral Yuki. Tanaka's face appeared on a separate display. "They will reach Concord space in approximately 4 years," she said. "And based on our analysis of their previous targets, they do not negotiate, and they do not take prisoners, and they consume everything in their path." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted and screamed, and some of them tried to flee. Raxi representatives roared with anger, and the Cathari buzzed with panic, and even the ancient Luminarch flickered with unstable light. Ilara waited for the noise to die down before she continued. "Humanity has been preparing for this threat since we discovered it," she said. "We built our hidden fleet not to conquer the galaxy, but to defend it, and we did it alone because we knew you would not believe us." High Counselor Vren floated toward her, and his form had grown dim with shame. "You were protecting us," he said slowly. "All this time while we mocked you and dismissed you as weak, you were building an army to save us." "Yes," Ilara said simply, "that is what humans do." Desok rose from his seat and walked to stand beside the human ambassador. Every eye in the chamber watched him. He had been the most feared warrior in the galaxy just days ago. Now he looked at Ilara Chun with something like wonder. "The Raxi Dominion prides itself on strength," he said, "but we were fighting the wrong enemies and wasting our power on petty conquest while the real threat approached." He turned to face the assembly. "I was wrong about humanity, and I was wrong about what it means to be strong. And true strength is not about domination, but about protection." The chamber fell silent again. "My people will stand with humanity against this enemy," Desok declared. "The Dominion will fight beside the species we once tried to conquer, and we will earn the second chance the humans have given us." One by one, the other species made similar pledges. The Cathari swarm offered their endless numbers. The Luminards shared ancient technologies they had kept hidden for millennia. Smaller species, who had never mattered before, stepped forward with whatever they could give. For the first time in galactic history, every spacefaring civilization was united against a common threat, and humanity was at the center of it all. After the assembly ended, Desok found Captain Okonkwo on an observation deck. They stood together, looking at the stars. "There is something I need to understand," Desok said. "When you captured my ship, you offered me water, and you treated me with kindness, even though I was your enemy. and why? Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. Because we have learned hard lessons, War Admiral, he said finally. Humanity's history is full of terrible wars, and we have conquered each other and enslaved each other and committed horrible acts in the name of power. He turned to face the Sock, but we also learned that enemies can become friends, and that mercy is stronger than revenge, and that the way you treat a defeated foe says everything about who you really are. The Sock thought about all the species his people had crushed under their boots. He thought about the suffering they had caused in the name of Raxi glory. You could have destroyed my fleet, he said. Your weapons were powerful enough, and no one would have blamed you. But then we would have killed thousands of Raxi soldiers, Okonkwo replied, and their families would have mourned them, and your people would have hated us forever. And when the silence comes, we will need every ship and every soldier we can get. He put a hand on the Sock's armored shoulder. You are not our enemy anymore, War Admiral, and you are our ally, and together we might just be strong enough to survive what is coming. The Sock looked at the human's face and saw no deception there, only determination and hope and a strange kind of faith. You believe we can win, he said. I believe we have to try, Okonkwo replied, and that is what being human means. In the darkness beyond the galaxy, the silence continued its approach. Millions of ships moved without rest toward the civilizations that had no idea they existed. They had consumed countless worlds across countless millennia. No force had ever stopped them. No species had ever survived their hunger. But they had never faced anything like what was waiting for them. They had never faced a galaxy that knew they were coming. They had never faced humanity. 4 years passed like a heartbeat. The galaxy transformed in ways no one could have imagined. Species that had hated each other for centuries now trained together and fought together and died together in preparation for what was coming. The Vraxi warriors who had once conquered the weak now stood as guardians of the defenseless. Their ferocity found new purpose in protecting the species they had once threatened. The Kethara swarm adapted their breeding programs to produce soldiers who could fight alongside human AI systems. Luminarch finally opened their archives and shared technologies they had hoarded for 10,000 years, and humanity was at the heart of it all. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the UDS Prometheus and looked at the fleet that stretched across the stars. The Prometheus was humanity's true flagship. 12 kilometers of metal and fire and hope. It had been built in secret over 40 years, and it was the most powerful vessel ever created by any species. But even the Prometheus was just one ship among millions. The combined fleet of the Galactic Alliance filled the sensor displays with so many signatures that the computers struggled to count them. Alvaraxi dreadnoughts flew in formation with human carrier Scathari swarm ships surrounded Luminarch energy platforms. 100 different species had sent everything they had. It was the largest military force ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. And it might not be enough. Admiral the Silence has entered sensor range, her tactical officer reported. Initial count is approximately 8 million vessels. 8 million, Admiral. Tanaka closed her eyes for just a moment. The Alliance had gathered 4 million ships. They were outnumbered 2 to 1. All ships, she said calmly, prepare for engagement, and this is what we have been training for. And this is what we have been building toward, and today we show the Silence what the galaxy can do when it stands together. Across the fleet her words were translated into 100 languages. Warriors of every species checked their weapons and said their prayers. Some of them would not survive the next few hours. All of them knew it. None of them ran. The Silence approached, and for the first time, the Alliance saw what they truly faced. The enemy ships were unlike anything in known space. They were organic and mechanical at the same time. Living metal that pulsed with dark energy. They moved in perfect unison without any communication that the Alliance could detect. When they were close enough, The silence sent a message. It was not words, it was an image. A vision of empty worlds and dead stars and civilizations reduced to ash. It was a promise of what was coming. Admiral Tanaka smiled grimly. Send. I'll reply, she ordered. The Prometheus fired first, and its main weapon was a beam of compressed gravity that tore through space itself. 100 silent ships vanished in the first second. Then the rest of the fleet opened fire. The battle was brutal. Beyond imagination, ships exploded on both sides in flowers of light and fire. The silence fought with relentless precision, and they did not hesitate, and they did not retreat. The Alliance fought with desperate courage, and they did not surrender, and they did not give up. Hours passed, and millions did. War Admiral Desok commanded the Vraxi forces from his new flagship, the Redemption. He fought beside humans he would have tried to kill 4 years ago. He watched Vraxi warriors sacrifice themselves to protect Cathari transports. He saw acts of heroism from species he had once dismissed as weak and worthless. This is what strength truly looks like, he said to himself as another wave of silence. Ships fell before the combined fire of the Alliance, but the enemy kept coming. For every silent ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The Alliance was being pushed back. Admiral Tanaka made a decision. Launch Project Echo. She ordered. A single ship detached from the Prometheus and flew toward the heart of the Silence Fleet. It was small and unarmed, and it should have been destroyed immediately, but it was not. The ship carried technology that humanity had been developing in absolute secrecy. It was not a weapon, it was a voice. Humanity had spent decades trying to understand the silence. They had analyzed every scrap of data from the dead worlds left in the enemy's wake. They had built machines that could translate not language, but meaning, intent, willed. The Echo ship reached the center of the Silence Fleet and broadcast a message. Not words, but something deeper. A concept that cut through the alien minds like a blade. A not prey where the shepherds of this galaxy stand united, turn back, ORBD steroid. A long terrible moment. Nothing happened. Then the silence stopped. Every single enemy ship froze in place. The Alliance held their fire and watched and waited. Admiral Tanaka gripped the arms of her command chair so hard her knuckles turned white. What are they doing? Someone whispered. The silent ships began to move again, but not forward. They turned away from the Alliance fleet. They turned back toward the void between galaxies, and then they left millions of ships retreating into the darkness, not defeated but deterred, not destroyed but warned. The bridge of the Prometheus erupted in cheers and tears and prayers of thanks. Admiral Tanaka slumped back in her chair and let out a breath. She felt like she had been holding for 30 years. It was over. They had won. 1 year later, the Galactic Alliance signed a new charter on Axis Prime. It was no longer a loose collection of competing powers. It was a true union of equals, and humanity stood at its heart. War Admiral Desok attended the ceremony as Supreme Commander of the Vraxi Defense Force. He stood beside Ambassador Alara Chun as the final documents were signed. "You could have ruled us all," he said quietly. "You had the power, and no one could have stopped you." Alara smiled, the same smile she had worn in the Concord chamber years ago, but now there was no deception behind it, only peace. "Any fool can conquer, Admiral," she said. "We wanted something harder, and we wanted friends." Desok laughed, and it was a warm sound without any mockery in it. "You are a strange species, Ambassador." "We?" "No," she replied. "But the galaxy seems to like us anyway." In the years that followed, the Alliance grew stronger. New species joined from the far reaches of space. Old enemies became partners. The galaxy entered an era of peace and cooperation that had never existed before. And in the darkness between stars, humanity's hidden fleets returned to their stations. The warriors who had revealed themselves went back to waiting. They hoped they would never be needed again, but they were ready. They were always ready, because humanity had learned long ago that the universe was full of dangers, and someone had to stand watch. Someone had to be the guardian in the night. Someone had to protect the dreamers and the artists and the traitors who just wanted to live in peace. That was what humans did. That was what humans would always do. Somewhere in the void, the silence remembered the message they had received. They remembered the will of the galaxy that had chosen to stand together. They remembered humanity, and they were afraid.